With all that being said, then who wishes to go first?
If I could begin, Your Honor.
Yes.
Lamont Jefferson again for Specially Appearing Defendants, Religious Technology Corporation, who I'll refer to as RTC at some points during my remarks, and Mr. David Miscavige, who is the ecclesiastical leader of the Church of Scientology. And Your Honor, I appreciate this opportunity. When you began, you said you'd like to hear opening statements and about the issues that are involved in the temporary injunction. And so we were expecting to hear something about why this situation involved irreparable harm, an imminent risk of loss, inadequate remedy at law, those sorts of things, the sorts of things that we argue all the time in temporary injunction hearings. Instead, we heard none of that. We heard a diatribe from Mr. Jeffrey about the history that dates back many years of the Church of Scientology. And just for the record, and this is undisputed, Mr. Rathbun has not been inside the Church of Scientology with any authority since before 2004. So he's been gone from the church from 2004 on. And the evidence that Mr. Jeffrey says he will present to you is evidence from a decade ago. And that will be the evidence that he's going to rely on to try to establish a connection between what's happened in Texas and between my clients, David Miscavige, and the Religious Technology Center, or RTC, of the Church of Scientology. So, Your Honor, my remarks are directed at our special appearance, and please consider this an opening statement for that purpose. I'll try to be brief, I'll try to be direct. But what the court, with respect to the special appearance, what the court will have to decide is whether or not Mrs. Rathbun, Monique Rathbun, can present the court with credible evidence today about what's going on today within the Church of Scientology. What the plaintiff attempts to do in order to show that connection is proffer affidavit and live testimony at trial from Mr. Rathbun based on his knowledge in 2004 and before, when he was at the church. Well, we have what Mr. Rathbun said when he was in a position of authority with the church with respect to whether Mr. Miscavige and the RTC had participated in any illegal, unlawful, improper way. And what Mr. Rathbun said when he was still with the Church of Scientology was this: as chairman of RTC's board of directors, Mr. Miscavige's corporate authority is narrowly circumscribed. His corporate authority does not, and that's emphasized in the text, embrace any, emphasized in the text, participation in the corporate affairs of CSI, CSC, or any other Scientology church or related entity. This fact was confirmed by the Internal Revenue Service after the most exhaustive examination of tax-exempt organizations ever undertaken by that agency. I was there. I participated in the entire administrative proceeding before the IRS on behalf of the RTC. Moreover, I began my employment with RTC on the same day in March of 1987 that Mr. Miscavige began his employment with RTC. And I can state that neither Mr. Miscavige's duties nor his authority has changed since that day. There is nothing secretive, hidden, or untoward about what RTC is or does. RTC's function is to ensure the orthodoxy of the practice of the Scientology religion. Its ecclesiastical relationship with other Scientology churches is as a result of arm's-length licensing agreements by which churches so authorized by RTC use the intellectual property marks of the religion owned by RTC. Those licensing agreements were reviewed by the IRS as part of its examination leading to tax exemption, and the IRS was satisfied that they did not infringe upon the corporate autonomy or independence of the individual churches within the hierarchy. One last brief excerpt. Again, these are the words of Mr. Rathbun, Mrs. Rathbun's husband, on whom they're relying to show this web, as they describe it. Mr. Miscavige's role within RTC is that of chairman of its board of directors, the corporation's most senior position. By virtue of that position within the entity responsible for the orthodox practice of the faith, he is the senior ecclesiastical authority in the religion on all matters of Scripture. That is all, period. Those are the words of Mr. Rathbun when he was with the church and before he brought this lawsuit. Your Honor, I am not a Scientologist, but I am a disciple of the First Amendment. And that's what is really at issue in this case. What Mr. Jeffrey wants as a result of this hearing is the opportunity to take the deposition of Mr. Miscavige, who is the ecclesiastical leader of a worldwide church. That's what he was aiming for. One of the things that was on the schedule for today was their motion to get additional discovery so that they could argue the special appearance hearing, including their request to take the deposition of Mr. Miscavige. But as soon as they discovered who was on the other side of this case, the lawyers on the other side of this case, Mr. Jeffrey issued a deposition notice, not for the investigators who supposedly harassed Ms. Rathbun, not for even the OSA, who they say is behind all of this, not for anybody who was involved in Texas activities, but for Mr. Miscavige. They wanted to take the deposition of Mr. Miscavige. And they'll ask for that order again in this case. They'll ask you, Your Honor, to order that Mr. Miscavige submit to them for a deposition. And I'll concede that such an order would apply a maximum amount of pressure on the church. And it would give the plaintiff a maximum settlement leverage position. But it would also be run afoul of the First Amendment of the Constitution, and it would be a gross violation of the constitutional guarantee of freedom of religion. Ms. Rathbun is perfectly capable of proceeding with all of her complaints in this lawsuit against the party that has appeared generally in this case, the Church of Scientology International. They have sufficient assets to address any damages that she claims she's suffered as a result of this supposed investigation. Your Honor, Texas law recognizes the ecclesiastical abstention doctrine, which I believe clearly applies here with respect to their request to take depositions, discovery, harass the leader of an international church. In Williams versus Gleason, a case that the court may be familiar with, the court said very specifically the Constitution forbids the government from interfering with the right of hierarchical religious bodies to establish their own internal rules and regulations and to create tribunals for adjudicating disputes over religious matters. What Mr. Jeffrey wants to do by this discovery that he's seeking is go behind, and test whether the way the church governs its activities is lawful. That's their single business enterprise vague allegation that they make in this case. The law doesn't allow that, Your Honor. The law says civil courts may not intrude into the church's governance of religious or ecclesiastical matters such as theological controversy, church discipline, ecclesiastical government, or the conformity of members to standards of morality. This is an overview of the Church of Scientology. Just a couple of pictures. I'm not going to take very long. These people are all faithful Scientologists, the people that we see depicted in these scenes. Mr. Miscavige is the ecclesiastical leader of the Scientology religion. We don't have to agree with the religion. We don't have to debate about the religion. All we have to know is that the IRS has recognized it as a religion. The United States recognizes it as a religion. The members of the church are faithful adherents to this religion, and that must be respected. Mr. Miscavige presides over meetings like this internationally that include members of the church from many different persuasions, from many different languages, from many different churches. So it is crystal clear, Your Honor, what's going on here. This is a simple case of an invasion of privacy by a woman who feels like she was abused. Okay, I get that. I get that. If someone has done her harm, she's entitled to recompense. She's entitled to make her case. She's entitled to demonstrate and get recovery from those who violated her rights if they did. That's not Mr. Miscavige. That's not he's not the one who's behind this, and they've got the person who is behind this. They sued an entity that they say is responsible directly for all of the conduct that she supposedly suffered. Let them prove that that entity is responsible. If they're successful in their proof, that entity will have to answer for all of its activities, not Mr. Miscavige and not the RTC, the Religious Technology Center. Just on so we have a special appearance that is pending. I want to just outline for the court how I believe how the court ought to analyze and decide whether this special appearance is good. The result of the special appearance, if we're successful, would be the dismissal of Mr. Miscavige, the dismissal of the RTC from this lawsuit because they don't have sufficient contacts with this state. We have affidavit testimony. We'll offer testimony from the stand that they have no sufficient contacts with the state so that this court could exercise jurisdiction over them, so they should be dismissed. That will not mean Ms. Rathbun doesn't have a remedy. She'll have a remedy. But that's not why the reason why the plaintiffs sued these individuals is because they believe, they understand that this is something that the church cares violently about, cares mightily about, that is preserving its ecclesiastical independence, preserving its ability to govern itself. So they filed their original petition. Original petition stated no jurisdictional facts. They simply named Mr. Miscavige as a defendant. They named the RTC as a defendant, and they cited this private investigation activity, and that was it. They didn't even suggest how these activities were tied together. We filed a special appearance. At that point, they filed their amended petition, and in their amended petition, they claim a bunch of things that have nothing to do with whether Mr. Miscavige and the RTC has a connection to the activities in Texas. Again, the only facts that they can rely on are facts that happened 2004 and before. So they're not bringing forth any evidence, any direct evidence that anything that's happening to Ms. Rathbun has anything to do with Mr. Miscavige. And in fact, it does not. Mr. Miscavige is busy on other things. He doesn't know Marty Rathbun. He doesn't care about Marty Rathbun. He's opening churches around the world for the faithful who are part of the Church of Scientology. They allege now that somehow Mr. Miscavige must be the one who said, go and surveil Ms. Rathbun. That Mr. Miscavige himself said, go and surveil Ms. Rathbun to, I presume, to the private investigators who did it. Even if that were true, which it is not, even if that were true, the case law is absolutely clear that that would be insufficient to support jurisdiction against Mr. Miscavige. And how do we know that? Because the Texas Supreme Court, not 2 weeks ago, handed down the Moncrief Oil versus OAO Gazprom marketing case, where they said, a non-resident directing a tort at Texas from afar is insufficient to confer specific jurisdiction. So even if the plaintiff is correct, that Mr. Miscavige sat behind his desk and said, go get Ms. Rathbun and surveil her, that, according to the Texas Supreme Court, would be insufficient to support jurisdiction in Texas. That is their best case of jurisdiction in Texas, and those facts are indisputably not true. Mr. Miscavige has submitted an affidavit from a personal affidavit attesting to the fact that he doesn't know these investigators and he had nothing to do with this supposed surveillance. So, Your Honor, when we get there, and I know we have some things we have to argue about as we proceed through the pending motions, and one of those things is going to be a motion that they'll have to get additional discovery, and we'll argue thoroughly about whether they're entitled to discovery under these facts. Our contention is that they're not entitled to discovery at all, that their pleading ties them to their jurisdictional facts, and that even if you accept everything they say in the pleading is true, there's still not sufficient jurisdiction to support personal jurisdiction on a constitutional basis. At that point, we'll get to the merits of the special appearance. With this background, hopefully the court will have a better appreciation for at least the arguments on both sides. And at the end of that, we will ask that Mr. Miscavige and the RTC be dismissed from the city for lack of jurisdiction. Thank you.